Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. In the meantime, feel free to tell us where you're from in the chat. Introduce yourself. Oh, this is so exciting. Every time I admit someone, another name pops up and is waiting to be let into the room. Welcome, everyone.
Everyone is very on time today.
Yes, so on time, punctual. We're going to get started in a couple minutes, but feel free to let us know where you're from in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, hear what you do for a living. Any questions, news, let us know. It's a little soft, Meredith. Did the music go away?
I don't know. I'll kick it up a notch here. Is that better?
Yeah. Sydney, Australia, welcome. How exciting, Toronto, Dallas, Pittsburgh, Austin, loving it. Brooklyn, New York, yes. I love how virtual events, everyone can join from everywhere. Very exciting. All right, y'all, we're gonna get started in about a minute. For those who just joined, please let us know where you're joining from in the chat. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. We'd love to welcome you. Ooh, up north, Michigan, welcome. Cincinnati, Ohio, what's up? Oh, we got a California person, yay. All right, I think we've got everybody in the meeting at this point. So I'm gonna get started. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Christy. I'll be your host for the day. And I have my co-organizers online with me as well. If y'all want to give a wave real quick, my co-organizers, welcome to the Conversational Collective. We are a group of people who are designing and innovating in the conversational design space. We are looking to learn and explore all things related to conversational design. So we are super excited to have you here with us today. I have a couple of announcements to share with you. First of all, if you join some of the links that we have in the slideshow and that will also be posted into the chat, you can sign up to receive our newsletter. And in the newsletter, you'll also get updates about upcoming events, also including links on how to join our LinkedIn group and our Slack channel. We're a pretty new community, so we're looking to grow and connect with you, and we'd love to keep in touch with you online after the event. So if you want to join up, fill the form via the link, then we'd be happy to get connected with you online. Also, we are looking for speakers. So there is a link for a speaker form as well. We'd love to hear from you, love to hear about your projects, your work, any ideas, thought leadership that you have. We'd love to hear from you and have you speak at our events. We will be taking a break for the remainder of the year, the holiday season, but we'll be picking back up in January. So we'd love to have some new speakers for 2021. So check out the form. Let us know if you have any questions. And that's about it for announcements. So I'm going to let Megan from USAA take it away and tell us a little bit more about her talk.
Sure, I'm going to go to, let's see if share screen works. One sec. So as you know, or just found out, I'm with USAA and I am a conversational design lead with that company. And I'll go into a little bit more detail the second share screen works with me. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
There's always just a little bit of a delay. Add a little bit of tension to the conversation. So hi, everyone. We're ready to go. So yeah, like I said, I'm a conversational design lead with USAA. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have abandoned most other social media for my own health. Well, not Instagram though, unfortunately, and I buy too much stuff off of that app, I'm sorry to say. But LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me. And if you want to continue the conversation, feel free to link up with anyone on here, but also reach out to me too. I love to answer questions and stay connected. So I am from, since we were talking about where we are, I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm actually originally from New Jersey and moved to the Midwest and then decided, you know, what the hell, and moved to Texas. So I've been here for about 2 years between San Antonio and Austin, and it's great. But we were just talking about this. I do miss fall a little bit. I miss having 4 seasons, but I do love Austin. It's a great place. So we're going to jump into it, and I'm going to have a couple prompts for the chat kind of throughout our discussion, but no pressure. So the topic of our conversation today is specifically principles, so conversational principles. But I'd really love to know what are some guiding principles that have kind of stayed with you, either through your professional life or your personal life or in design, really anything. Are there ethical principles? If you're thinking about those principles, you know, maybe if you're a designer, you think of kind of Dieter Rand's The 10 Principles of Good Design. If you're working in conversational technology, you might think of, you know, Microsoft and their responsible artificial intelligence principles, which are actually really great. So their principles are kind of everywhere, and they're kind of made by everybody. And sometimes it's hard to discern, you know, what qualifies as a principle and what maybe doesn't. We're going to talk about how to build out your own principles, so your own set for you, your team, or your organization to help make your conversational products better, to build stronger conversational experiences, and how to get other people on board with that as well, because principles made just for your team that don't extend out into the rest of your company or to your customers, they kind of get lost and they're not really serving the purpose of a principle. So when I specifically talk about principles, and I'm thinking of these kind of guiding statements that are rooted in the core values of your company. They're part of your design process. And while they're rooted, they're not inflexible. We understand that, you know, customer needs change, or maybe your company culture changes, and there does need to be some flex in those principles, enough to grow with how you grow. They also need to be actionable. If they're too passive, if they're not inspiring, if it's not something you feel strongly about, you're probably not going to adhere it, and you're not going to get other people excited about it as well. So you really want it to feel like it's driving something. It's, you know, pushing your team to lean into the future, to build better, and to make more solid design decisions. Obviously include having empathy for your end user, your customer, or in our case, we call them members. It should be accessible. And in that, I mean, have a common vocabulary. It should be understandable and repeatable. Maybe not word for word, like we're not wanting robotic here, but if somebody can kind of reiterate the essence behind that principle that maybe is not 100% familiar with your team, that's a success. And it should be what you are and what you aren't. So that kind of ties into, you know, being actionable and strong and rooted. You're saying who you are. If you say who you are, you're also saying who you aren't, or what you don't do, or what you don't believe in. And that's really great because it gives you power to say no, you know, with style, obviously, not just a flat out no. But, you know, that's great for if there's decisions coming down the line. If they're not totally aligned with your principles, that might not be the right end decision. So that's where principles really help with that. And I'm going to stop because I'd love to hear what the chat has to say. What are some guiding principles that have come up? If someone could read those off.
Let's see if people can type into the chat. We've got, I love the concept of the cooperative principle in conversational design, but it seems harder to implement with the conversational tools available today.
I would agree with that. I think it in Grice's maxims as well. So they're kind of like the cooperative principle focused on human conversation. And while we're trying to get conversational design there, human conversation is very different still from our capabilities as far as building conversational is. So it's like a nice ideal. It is that push into the future. But for us, it's a little bit tougher. I agree with that, to kind of like fully get there.
We've got keep it simple, short.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, I love the saying what you are saying is what you're not.
Yeah, I like to say when we're creating value statements in workshops, I personally like to say write something that you'd get in a bar fight over. Like truly, if you're not feeling it here where you're going to argue with somebody over beers about it, then it's maybe not strong enough to stand up to, you know, critics, or again, like pressure from future design decisions and things like that. You have to be able to almost fight with it, believe in it that much. Yeah, so principles aren't made in a vacuum. Obviously, we don't necessarily want one person to really author them solely alone and like locked in a room. But they're also not made by committee. Don't invite, you know, you pull in 90 people and you get a very watered down, maybe not as strong, maybe not as provocative set of guiding principles. So there's kind of a happy balance between this, but this is definitely what they're not. They're not made in a vacuum, and they're not made by committee. They're really, they're made by your team. And sometimes if your team is very large, you can even do a core group, but they are made in a collaborative way. They are made with a sense of togetherness, but they're also made in a way where not everybody is giving all of the inputs into them all the time. So you kind of have to branch that out and figure out who needs to be informed on them, who's writing the initial set, who's weighing in and giving their thoughts, and work through it on that process. And so the key to really creating these beyond not going too small or too big is really setting those boundaries, very clear boundaries, and also getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because if you're going to write a strong statement, you're going to have some strong opinions, and there's going to be times where maybe you agree to disagree. There should be a lot of healthy challenge, Because again, this is something you have to stand by, which means you have to work through it as a group. So you all believe and know together on that. So we'll get into a little bit of the process. This is kind of my very short how-to of how to do this, now that we've talked about kind of the tools that you need. So make sure, even before you jump into this and jump into principles, that your company has like a value statement or a purpose, and that you also have some information and research on your customers and users. You do have to be kind of informed to a certain degree before you start creating principles. You need to know where your design stands, where your company stands, and where you all stand. So get that together ahead of time and make sure your group is kind of clear on what all that is. So set that baseline. But once you do that, you can jump right in. And because we're remote, we've got a lot of great tools to do this with. This is kind of a social exercise to a degree. So take Miro, get Mural. If you're in person, get a whiteboard. You know, if you're a facilitator, you're used to it, like break out the Post-it notes. Just you're wanting a way to socially generate these initial pieces of information. So use whatever, group workshopping tool that you have on hand. And you're going to do two things. The first thing is reflect independently. So think on your own. Again, take your knowledge of the company, where it's going, what you're doing, and take a moment to think about what your core values are. Take a moment to think about how you define the qualities of good design, how you define a good experience, how you define a good conversation, and then come into that social workshop and lay out all the information. Don't worry, like wordsmithing, don't worry about it. Just put all the information on there, get it all out there. What do you hold true? What does your group hold true? Get all the ideas out there first. Because you're going to take that mass wall, we'll just pretend it's a mass wall of thoughts and feelings and opinions and beliefs, and start pulling them together into themes. So you want to start grouping and organizing. And this is where a little bit of the challenging begins. No sticky note, no Post-it note is sacred. And we should be, moving and shuffling those around and pulling things together into kind of more organized themes. So these groups that kind of speak to what all those notes and thoughts are saying. And that's really where you're creating the foundation for your principles. Like that's it. It's a pretty simple building block. So scrutinize, review, make sure you feel solid about those themes. And then this is a moment where maybe you're not pulling the whole group into the next step. It's up to you. It's up to how connected your team is or how big it is. But you're going to want to take those themes and break down the meaning behind those and write out just like kind of a short summary. Don't worry about wordsmithing too much. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't let perfect get in the way of good enough at this point in time. If you write out a whole page, that's okay. We'll distill it a little bit later. But that's really what you want to do is start explaining those themes as if you were trying to educate somebody totally unfamiliar with them. So I've got on my page like tolerating failure and supporting the relationship. So I would write that out, how I would describe that to somebody else in the context of my field and in the context of conversational design. And again, don't worry about it being perfect. You can work in teams, in pairs. You can, depending on how many themes you have, break them out however you need. And just start writing those words on a page in a Word doc. Again, in Miro or a shared application is fine. And short note, I'm going to hit on this a lot, be opinionated. The point of a principle is to put a stake in the sand. It's to say what you are and what you are not. So it is okay to have strong thoughts on these. And it's okay to feel a little uncomfortable with that as well. I know sometimes we're not always like super into having or putting a lot of attitude into our words, but it's really important because you're kind of setting the bar for where this principle goes. So if you add a little edge, it's totally okay. I give you permission to do that. Once you have kind of those principles written out and you feel like you've got them in a pretty solid place, then you socialize. And by socialize, I don't mean like share them everywhere. Don't do that yet. But pick a few people that are either unfamiliar with your area or maybe work on another team. Maybe if you're even comfortable, maybe they're in your field, but they're actually outside of your company. and have them read through those principles. And don't explain them to that person. Don't give them a lot of preface. Allow them the time to read your words and then have them tell you what those words mean to them. Have them talk about, you know, are they confused by anything? Have them interpret those words and explain to you what that means. You know, as far as if they're a programmer, like how they would take that, what that means to them, and how they would code out, you know, a new conversational platform. If they're a designer, have them take your words and explain how they would apply that to their design. And this is where you're going to start hearing what really rings true to them, what needs clarity, what might need more explaining, what needs paring down. If it's a pretty good indicator, if their eyes start to gloss over, that you've probably overwhelmed them to a degree. So then you'll know to kind of dial it back a little bit. But you should get some head nods and like people going, okay, I get this, where this is going. And once you have kind of that understanding or what you need to change, then you can jump into refining. So you're going to iterate and refine. Again, take it back to somebody a little bit unfamiliar and have them read through it and kind of examine what that means and break it down. And then you're kind of distill, and hopefully your content, if it goes from, if you have a massive page, it's gonna slowly do this. So it's gonna distill down. We're going for fine fine whiskey, not cheap plastic bottle vodka. So you want to get to that nice, clear statement that kind of represents that principle. And over the course of these working sessions and this effort, the number of principles you end up with might change. So at first you might have, 10, but going through this process, maybe it comes down to 3, and then you're like, we need to break this out a little bit more for more context. So it goes up to 5. There's not like a set right number. I think it's whatever you feel like can appropriately guide the work. So I can't tell you like only 3, it's only a word, or only 10, or only 20. I mean, you might not want 20, but make sure it's enough where it breaks down your beliefs and your process in a way that is clear to somebody else, and that they're also not competing with each other, and that they're individual enough. So if there's too many similarities, it can start causing confusion. So you want them individual enough, clear, and not competing or disagreeing with each other. That's the worst, is if you're having some tension there between principles. So that would require some adjustment. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'd love to know if anybody has any questions about the process so far.
We did have one question come through. Let me make sure I can find it. It was for a couple of slides back. Is committee different than community? If not community driven, how can we ensure that they are shared values / principles?
I would say committee is different from community. Committee is typically, it's getting everybody in the room to weigh in out of kind of a sense of politeness, that like everybody has to add an opinion. When you talk about community is really ensuring that ideals and point of views are represented, which doesn't necessarily mean everybody's in the room, but the key people that know those ideals are in the room to weigh in. That was an awesome question, by the way. I did not expect that. So after you're going through this entire process, your principles might start to look like this. And these are actually the USAA principles that we've pulled together for conversational design, or this is a version of them. I'm kind of showing little snippets of our process. So we have 6 principles, and we are a very large company. So we kind of moved back and forth between how much and how little we had to say for how many different departments and people there are. So I'm going to explain how to now break out your principles. So you've got your kind of core, this base, your 3 to 8 to 10 that you feel really solid about and feel are really clear. And these are good as is, but you need to take it a little bit further to start showing people how to build experiences. And that's why I recommend taking your principles and building out specific actions or tactics that go along with them. And these actions or tactics, depending on what you want to call them, these are the things that drive people to mirror, to emulate your principles. So they'll hear thoughtful, but when they understand and can see that it means, don't ask for too much too frequently, that's how it really starts getting socialized. When people know, oh, here's the action I can specifically take to do that, they'll start repeating it, they'll start sharing it with others. And it's like less work on your part at that point. They'll start, it's almost like a bottom up. So top down, you've created your principle, but the bottom up is they see how it works in action. And then they start really believing in the principle itself. Because you'll get that, you develop a set of principles and there is a little skepticism when you make that, similar to personas or some other things in the design world that's considered quote unquote fluffy. But when they have this, which is this really solid foundation of what you can do with it, then they start to buy in and then they believe. And they're like, yes, I absolutely want my experience to be thoughtful because I understand that I'm highlighting the value of the customer's efforts as I'm going through this process. And to make it even easier, once you have these actions, you start showing how it works in a conversation. And this can work across the entire conversation or parts of the interaction can pluck out those different actions and pieces of your principles. So I've just got a kind of an example here. And Usaa is a financial insurance company. So we have a wide variety of responses that are needed across our different channels and our different conversational platforms. We have everything from someone's just looking at their banking balance to somebody has lost a loved one. So there's kind of a wide breadth of responses and modes and mentalities of our membership. And the principles help fit into that by breaking down how we can adapt those responses depending on the situation. So for this one, which is just a simple claims, we're thinking thoughtful, relevant, and clear. And you can apply all principles to all designs at the same time, but it's really helpful to call out like where those principles and actions stand out in a conversation. Again, this helps people understand like the value behind them and what they mean and what they can actually do with them. So I'm sorry to hear that. We're showing listening with empathy. We're being thoughtful in the conversation. And by showing steps and first and next and explaining that, we're moving to be clear as far as what needs to go on in this conversation. We're showing them that we know their policy and that we know what vehicles they have. We're choosing to be relevant to help the member get to their end goal. And that kind of turns into the title of my presentation, which is these constellations. So visually in my head, this is kind of how I see it. If you take one interaction and you start pulling out the little pieces of, if I say this, I'm choosing to be, easy, make that experience easy for them. And it breaks out into, being consistent in interactions. It also makes it easy. And being transparent and upfront about what we can do or what information we need is choosing to be ethical for our members. And forgiving, which is my favorite Usaa principle, and I could probably make an entire presentation alone on it. That's our version of error tolerance, because typically in conversational experiences, the user is not necessarily committing an error. It's that our system didn't completely understand what they were saying. So principle of forgiving is choosing to assume good intent on the part of our users and our members and build out experiences where we, try to prevent errors completely, but have a soft recovery just in case there's a mismatch there, just in case one didn't understand the other, which is a part of natural conversation that we all use when we're interacting. And organizing information in chunks, so making things clear, and that in turn makes it an easier interaction. So you kind of see how these principles and actions form these groupings and parts of a conversation. And it's cool when you tie it into your actual designs too, if you start building out your conversations and kind of highlight and write this principle, this action, this principle, this action. And people start to light up and they start seeing, I know exactly how to build this next conversation. I know exactly how to add on, you know, even something that's a dry disclaimer. Now I know how to build on those initial conversations and pieces of information and interactions without being disruptive to the overall experience. And part of building out all the principles and showing how to design them and teaching others to design them is making sure that they go out far beyond you, so far beyond your reach throughout your company, even, you know, into the world to your competitors. Again, it's your stake in the sand, so it needs to be shared, and it needs to be a living thing that lives beyond you and your team for it to be successful. And a really easy way to do that is collaborate. But when I say collaborate, I mean invite partners, especially the skeptical ones. Those are always the good ones to work on first. Invite them to brainstorm sessions and show them how the principles and the actions that you've created work on in-progress work, or maybe even a current experience. Kind of do almost a heuristic evaluation of a current experience and show how it can be changed or improved with those principles. Make friends, make lots of friends. So again, it's always great to start with your detractors and flip them, because they're very passionate. Like, they're going to be passionate one way or another. So you want to be passionate for you and your team. But find those ambassadors, because they're the ones, if you can teach them and they believe and understand your principles and take them to heart, they'll tell them to everybody. They'll go throughout your company. They'll sell where you don't have to, and they'll get other people repeating and following them. And you really want some good friends to go do that for you. So you're not kind of carrying that weight alone. And always you should show the value of that. So if you've created solid principles, if they're founded in the qualities of good design and creating excellent experiences, if you're applying them consistently, you're really setting a higher bar for conversational, and that should come up in your metrics. So absolutely show how your principles are influencing better design, and it is returning either, you know, if it's profit-driven company, like money back, money saved, you know, conversions, whatever metrics your particular organization follows, show how the principles and using them improves those and adds even more beyond that. And with that, I know we're kind of short, but that's essentially, it's, you know, I made it sound very simple. It does take, the process for us specifically took about 6 months. So from us just starting talking about our values and what we believe in, and we started that as a small team together. It's just what are our values? What do we believe? And working all the way through to creating principal workshops, guidance, educational materials. So about half a year. And I think most of you should be able to do it a little bit more quickly. I am part of a large org, so things do move a little bit more slowly. But I will say in the last week, I've had 3 separate meetings where somebody who is not related to my area at all, and we just happened to be on the same call with the other 50 people on whatever check-in it was that day, and they brought up the conversational design principles without any prompting from me, without me suggesting or even speaking in the meeting. So that for me is a true success, to get folks that they don't know my name, but they know that they should be applying these principles to their designs. They feel that they are important enough to be there. So I would say it's been a very successful, albeit long and difficult journey. So, and I would love to kind of take this to a wider discussion. That's why I have Q&D. It's not Q&A so much, although I am happy to answer questions. I'd love to continue the discussion on principles, and I guess share anything else I can about how we got from point A to B with our conversational team.
Yeah, that is a solid win. Let's give Megan a round of applause. The sign for applause is shaking your hands like this. We'll give her a quick round of applause, everyone. So we do have a few questions that were in the chat, Megan, so we could start there. Or if you wanted to open up for discussion, we can invite everyone to unmute themselves and ask you directly. What do you prefer?
Yeah, let's go to discussion. I love that.
All right, so yeah, feel free to unmute and take it away, y'all.
I'm checking chat real quick. Oh, I saw somebody saying inviting skeptics to your brainstorm is good. Yes, it really is. We've employed that in the past, even at past companies. And as crotchety as they may seem, again, they are very passionate people. And if you flip them, they'll bar fight for you. Like, you won't have to do anything. They will fight for you.
You can get some evangelists if you.
It's almost making friends with the enemy, sort of a move.
I see for large organizations, what kind of approval process exists for aligning conversational principles to traditional design principles? We are, this is actually something we're working on right now. So great top of mind topic. We do have a design language system team. And we were lucky enough that somebody on that team actually has a background in conversational. So I think it might be cheating to say I already have an expert in that room. But a big part of USAA and the company as a whole, kind of a larger kind of value and design value, is accessibility. So accessible design, not just meeting the bare minimum of kind of the requirements we have, which is if you're not familiar, the WCAG 2.0 and 2.1. But that is a core tenet and value across USAA. People are very passionate about. And making better, in the same way we would make better visual design, makes everything more, if you make a design more accessible visually, it's more usable and a better experience for everyone. We take that and apply the same reasoning to conversational. If you make your conversational design more accessible, if you're using better language, if you're structuring things more appropriately, it's the same output. It's a better experience for everybody. So I think that's how we've worked through it, is kind of finding that common ground and then showing that shared connection. Because a lot of times we have a phone line and we have text, but one of our big conversational channels is chat, and that's both, you know, content, the conversation, and visual. So those two kind of naturally play off of each other. We just use that connecting accessibility thread for a lot of those conversations.
We had another question about what kind of principles would you imagine a smaller company having, or would principles differ by use case, industry type?
Principles will really differ by what you personally believe in or your team. If it's a smaller company, you can kind of open it up to maybe having even more people participate to help build them out. But it's not really, it's not necessarily dictated by size of company. It's really dictated by core values. And that's where it comes to getting in the room and really hashing out what you stand for and what you believe in as individuals in a team. And you'll kind of see, like, there's just a kind of a natural alignment that happens as you talk through those and what you believe in. And it might actually unearth things about the culture of your company you hadn't, you know, initially considered. About how you want to treat your customers or each other.
Another question was, for larger organizations, what kind of approval process exists for aligning conversational principles to traditional design principles?
Oh, I think I maybe half answered that. That's my bad. The approval process, like the formal approval process for us, is really getting buy-in from somebody very senior. So we've made the effort to pull that person in personally and make sure that they're updated and informed. Because again, you kind of build that evangelist. So for us, it's just getting that person to sign off. And then the rest is easy. It's just through partnerships and actively working with the people around us. If this was to become like the USAA guiding set of principles, I might have to harass the CEO, but I don't know if we'll get that far. But we are pretty high up as far as people backing it and approving it.
We've got another question. How does engagement with stakeholders change throughout the process?
Initially, engagement should be a little bit lighter with stakeholders, or you risk kind of getting into that design by committee, but you do want to keep them informed. You do want to let them know what's going on. They are great resources for sharing out that initial set of principles I talked about when you do that write-up, because you want to make sure that they understand what you're talking about. If they're stakeholders where they are like representative of, say, customer research or something that is really intrinsic to figuring out your values, I would say pull them into the room and help them create with you. If it's more buy-in and approval, I would say use them as soundboards, but don't always let them directly create with you along the way.
We have a couple more from the chat. Did you remove or eliminate any principles during this process?
We mushed a couple together and then rebroke some out. Ethical, so our ethical principle was a little tricky. It started out as kind of two separate, but a little too similar groupings. And it was really centered around kind of this accessibility, so being inclusive and accessible, but also being responsible as a company. So being truthful and being honest and being forward with our members. And we felt like they kind of naturally came together. When you choose to be ethical, you're kind of meeting all of those, at least from our perspective. So we did kind of mush those together. I would say the naming of our principles probably changed just a lot. It's hard, you see easy and you're like, yeah, they just wrote easy. No, we went through, that was probably the one that went through the most renames. The previous name for that was simple. And in a long discussion we had about, again, this is like hashing it out in a room and kind of fighting over it. It was called Simple. And I felt very strongly about calling it Simple, but my director at the time had a really great point to calling it easy. And that was that you can have something be simple, like you can design something simple and it doesn't feel easy. And we want it to feel like an effortless exchange is how we described it. So that's how we got to calling it easy for us. And like I said, being forgiving, that originally hit on like error tolerance until we decided that we needed to kind of take a more human-centered view here and recognize that, again, people that interact with us, especially through conversational channels, they mean well, they're being cooperative. So it's not their error necessarily, and we need to build a forgiving platform.
We've got a few more coming in, but I know you mentioned you wanted to do more discussion type. Do you want to take a break from the Q&A?
Sure. I'll do one more, and then we'll go to discussion.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. The principles you referenced, are they published publicly or? So I would like to get this is like the first initial me putting it out in the world after going through many, many approvals from our legal team. But the best way to set up principles is really to push them beyond your company. If you get even more people believing in them, it kind of shows others what you stand for as a company and how you design internally. So I very much want our principles to live public facing at some point, hopefully in the near future. If I get enough people flipped and talking about the principles, they might just go out on their own without me completely, which is totally okay. But I would want that to happen. It's not out there right now unless you rewatch this presentation. But at some point, yes, absolutely, it should be.
A great question. So if anyone wants to join in on the discussion, share your opinions or points that you thought were really great from the talk, feel free to unmute and let us know what you think.
I was curious, just to kind of start more discussion, has anyone else here done something like this? Maybe it wasn't, constellations, or maybe you didn't call them principles, but curious if anyone else has done something similar or used a similar process
I
to
wish.
find principles forward.
I wish.
It's not too late. You can still do it.
No one? Well, we can all use these constellations then.
That's it. You only need the one set. You're good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer we've got another question. So in your experience, what are the concrete signs that a principle you've created is milquetoast and needs to be rewritten or scrapped? I think so we did our initial reads and we got a sense then. It's now reaching that point of socialization where I should get a new set of kind of detractors or people that are kind of not super into them. And I should start seeing if maybe some of our principles need to be rewritten. I would say just recently we had one, it wasn't milquetoast, but it was very interesting. So our thoughtful principle, we have one about responding with empathy. And someone from our chat platform, specifically the technology end, said, well, what do you mean by empathy? Because that's very, very complex from our side. And that gave it an entirely different view to me. And we actually have a note. This is something we're going to work on in the next few weeks, probably, is the way we wrote that statement the best way to write that statement? Or do we need to adjust it so we're not giving our platform team collective heartburn because they think that we're forcing them to produce the most advanced AI in the world when we just want, a few keywords like throughout the conversation or something along those lines. So I think that's the cue. Is you start seeing different levels of feedback come in. It comes in waves. So you take in that wave and you evaluate what you're getting, because just because you're hearing something doesn't necessarily mean you need to change it. But if it's in the case like the empathy, it might be worth re-examining and expanding.
When's the right time to do something like this?
Do it. No joke. I mean, the sooner, everybody wants to the company's off the ground, just starting, you should do them, but really do them at any time. Usaa is coming up on its 100th birthday, and Conversational Principles just started existing in the world for them earlier this year. So start now, do it now. The smaller your company is, the easier it should be to get it socialized and push it forward. Like I said, it took us about 6 months because we just had a lot of people to talk through. But the sooner you start, the sooner you'll get them.
Someone had a question about advice for running workshops. Do you have any advice for running workshops?
Have a good sense of humor, really. Workshops. So the great thing about workshops is almost anything can be a workshop, and there's a lot of resources and methods, and so many people beyond me that kind of know what to do with that. But the thing about running a successful workshop is being adaptable and flexible. You're going to have to do things on the fly, and you have to accept that not everything's going to be perfect, or not everyone's going to understand what's going on. And you just kind of reframe and rebuild and go at the pace that the room can go at. And that's where really, it doesn't hurt to have a couple dad jokes for awkward pauses or just points of tension, and keeping a good humor. Because if you're the facilitator of that workshop, the way that you carry yourself is going to guide how everybody kind of responds and reacts to you. So if you're very serious, people are going to start getting very stressed. And you really want them to enjoy their time in that workshop and get through what they need to get through.
Yeah, I have a question about, to follow up on the timing question. I mean, I feel like it's one of those things for timing. It's best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. But also, how do you convince somebody to allow you to have the space to do this kind of thing? I feel like a lot of organizations that I've worked for, we have a certain set of deliverables. Everything always seems tight, right? Budget is kind of an issue. And how do you convince the organization to say, let's take a step back for a second, try to define these principles, because, in the future, it'll help us stay cohesive with our brand and, increase velocity, et cetera, et cetera. Personally, I've just never found those arguments to be overly effective in terms of being able to carve out space. So just wondering how you were able to do that at USAA.
two parts. One, I just happened to be lucky enough to be part of the conversational enablement team, and one of our primary goals is to educate, and Principles is just kind of a natural extension of that. But if you're not as lucky as me, the next best thing is not necessarily saying like this will improve, because the idea is that yes, it will, but showing examples where it has. So like the NHS has guiding principles. There are a lot of even road designers have design. There's a set of design principles specific to that, and it's showing the value from those, that you have these massive healthcare entities, these financial institutions, the like infrastructure, and they are using the principles. So why aren't we? And doing it, kind of flipping it around that way. You really, because I agree, you can say this is good and we should do this, but you're not necessarily going to get buy-in for some folks without seeing an actual example outside of maybe your industry or larger than that. When they start seeing that like, oh, governments are, employing these, and this is how they're setting them up, and this is how it translates to outputs, folks are a little bit more likely then to buy in. And sometimes it's a little bit of a part of like asking forgiveness later. We did that a little bit. I think design and designers naturally kind of want to push everything to the frustration of many people, many executives, many developers, many researchers. But I think taking advantage of that helps as well. It's just showing, hey, we already started this stuff too. Here's some good evidence, and like here's where we can take this. And you might get a little bit more buy-in. It's definitely dependent on culture of the company as well. So I can't say that like following all of my steps will absolutely get you there, but it can help.
Right on. Well, we are reaching the end of our time together. Thank you so much for joining us today, Megan. One more round of applause for Megan. Yay! Hand claps. Oh, and we have actual emojis for hand claps. Awesome. So as I mentioned, there's some links in the chat if you'd like to get to be on our newsletter and be notified when we'll have our next event. We will start up again in January. We're taking a break for the holidays. So we'll let you guys know first on the newsletter if you're signed up for the newsletter. And then you can also join us on our LinkedIn group and our Slack group as well to stay in touch and let us know if you have any questions. And we thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight, everyone. We hope you have a good night. Thanks so much.
Well, bye. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Megan, how are you?
Extra awkward.
Hey, yeah, at some point I'll message you like later, but I like had to reformat my phone, so I need to get your number again. So, but no, that was awesome. It was great to see how like the principles came together, like with into the constellations. Really loved it, and of course, like the visuals were incredible as always. So, yeah, awesome job.
FYI, Kevin helped me build these principles. He was actually one of the first people that when we had a write-up, we read them too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Welcome, Kevin. Thanks for coming tonight.
Hey, yeah, no, it's great to be here. I wouldn't miss this at all. So when I saw that Megan was presenting, I definitely wanted to check it out. So yeah, it's really cool. And it's awesome to see how it's like evolved over time. And it's really cool to hear that like people are talking about it and, excited about it, because I mean, I think that's definitely part of it is, there's the buy-in part of it, but when people get excited about principles, something that they can really, latch on to, I think that it shows that you've built something that'll last. So yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I think I love my crew, and Kevin was part of that. I think I definitely did not do this in a vacuum, and that team was absolutely amazing. So to have, I wasn't kidding, like I have random people talk about it now. I think that just speaks to the effort of what we created.
I mean, that's a really big win to have people that you didn't even talk to personally talking about those principles. That's a really big win.
Yeah, it's very funny in meetings where somebody like, they have no idea who I am. And they're like, I hear there's conversational principles that it's very critical. Like we need to incorporate, like, how do we put these into our business plan?
I love that. That's awesome. And for that to happen too at a company that's like fairly large, like USA, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that speaks to too, like just some of the like really like passionate people that are at USAA, and like not just in the design organization, but even within the business. We have like business partners that are really excited about design and the principles too. And it's like, I think it helps when you have like, you know, when Megan was talking about having those advocates that are just excited and want to, you know, share that or just learn more, you know, that is definitely helpful when it comes to like workshops as well, is having people that are excited about, you know, participating and things like that too. But Megan's an awesome facilitator, and, you know, it was just, you know, being in a workshop, keeping things going. It's just, yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, it's awesome stuff.
All right, you need to
Like it was
give me your new phone number.
It sounds like it was something that was needed for our participants at the meetup tonight, since they didn't use anything like this before. So hopefully now your thought, it'll continue as thought leadership for you, and kind of grow within the design community and the conversational design community at large. So that's pretty cool. Great way to cap our end of the year. We had such a good turnout too. I talked to a couple people. I like to just message new faces, and there were a lot of them, and it sounded like a lot of them joined because of you, Megan. So thanks for bringing a good crowd as well.
Absolutely. And I want to extend, so we'd set this up before COVID. Whenever things open up again, I guess we're USAA, we do want to actually host you guys if, you know, when stuff, if it's in person again, I guess in the future. I can't say when, but we would like to be a host for you all.
Oh, we would absolutely love that when things calm down. We will be looking for venues, so we'll reach out to you when the time
All
is
right, we'll stay in touch. Thank you all. This was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I'll share the recording with you also. Oh, she left. All right.
Yeah, I'll post it to the YouTube when it's out.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Good job, Christy. That was awesome. That was our best yet. All right. See ya. Bye.